Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on Cosmic Cassie. This is going to be our new podcast. I'm going to share some interesting information that I've kind of been digging into and looking up, and I just think it's really cool, so I would love to share it. Um, I named this comparison of esoteric knowledge because it's kind of what I've been up to. And this is one of the things that I've always loved doing ever since I was a teenager is really digging really deep, diving into those rabbit holes and kind of getting lost in them. And to be honest, it used to be a little bit of a nuisance because I would learn all these really interesting and new things in a very in depth way. And then I really wouldn't have anything that I could do with that knowledge. But I learned for the sake of learning. That was the fun part for me. And as I get older and as I kind of fall deeper and deeper onto my path, I realize the more information that I take in, it's actually now starting to create a lot of connections that I never thought that it would. And I definitely am a true believer in one of the ways that you can enhance your spirituality, evolve, become enlightened, whatever your goal is. One of the primary ways to do that is making sure you're always willing to learn, research, gain more knowledge. Knowledge helps you define the wisdom and the experiences that you have, and that's how it turns into wisdom and power. So, as I make these connections, I thought this time I would go ahead and share it. This has happened a couple times before, but I'm really excited about this one. So, I've read multiple different types of literature around the esoteric nature for years now. And I'm starting to try to remember where I read bits and pieces to fit the puzzle together where I'm at now. But one of the things is I've been looking at the comparison of Jewish mysticism, Catholicism, astrology, Hermeticism, all of these big, things that we are aware of, where all these ancient texts and things like this come from. I'm running across some interesting uh, similarities between these texts. So now I'm kind of diving back into them and reading them again, listening to the audiobook versions, things like this, kind of doing extra research and putting things together. So just to name some of these texts that I'm kind of diving deeper into as of right now, one of the things is the tarot and how that actually is created through the Kabbalah and the tree of life. When you look deeper into the tree of life, it's almost like that's where they gained wisdom to create tarot cards, right? And then with that, astrology. And I've also been looking at the Torah and kind of jumping into the Zohar for the first time. That one's a little bit more tricky to find the right resources since I'm not able to read Hebrew just yet. It's one of the things on my goal list that I want to practice and learn how to do. So and then looking at the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean version of it, but also the Book of Secret Creation and Art of Nature, which is actually said to be a formerly translated version of Emerald Tablets. The Emerald Tablets version that we read in English today came from the Latin or Grecian translation of it. This one comes from the Arabic translation. So it's an earlier translation, so it might be a little bit more authentic. The storyline goes a little bit different. It talks about Balil being the main character, recounting how he came into this knowledge and found it and things like this. He found these tablets. Um, but that is called the Book of Secrets, Secret Creation and Art of Nature. And then also looking at the books of Enoch, the Theatrum Chemica Britannicum is one of the first real texts that I came into and started reading, and I had to do my own translation. A lot of it was in very broken English. It was a much earlier translation of Latin, so there's a lot of word replacements that you have to do there to better understand what's being said. That falls into Hermeticism as well as like alchemy. And then finally, a new one is the Pyramid Code and the Rays of Light. This is something that I've been following and looking into and kind of just, being aware of and making sure I stay tapped in. But that's actually where all of this started. Is I started to have a lot of connections after I read the Pyramid Code. A lot of texts that I've read in the past suddenly came together, and that's when this really happened, with me connecting a lot of dots between a lot of different things. So I was reading the Rays of Light. I finished one of them. There's two of them released, and I don't know, one day it hit me that I am familiar with that term, ray of light. And that's where the first kind of thing came into play, where I start gathering different resources and putting them together. So just to share, I wrote down 3 examples for you guys to share kind of the similarities that I'm talking about. So starting with rays of light. So obviously the pyramid code, if you haven't seen it or heard about it, I definitely recommend looking into it. It's a very interesting learning, if anything. But there is these rays of light scripts that this person is publishing, and they've published 2 of them now, and they're supposed to have coding within it, but the codes were removed for a later date. And when you read the rays of light, I think that for a lot of people, it looks just like a script and it reads that way. A lot of conversations between different people. And it kind of hit me one day that I think this is more, I think this is deeper. And that's when I started looking into the actual name. And that led me into actually Jewish mysticism, where they talk about 7 rays of light specifically. And the background for a lot of the pyramid code and rays of light has Jewish mysticism tied into it. So as I read more about that, I realized that that sounded a lot like the Emerald Tablets. When I read that, it sounded a lot like the Lords. In the Emerald Tablets, they talk about 7 lords. And the reason why I made that connection is in Jewish mysticism, the rays of light are described as having the vibration and the name of numbers. And in the Emerald Tablets, these lords are named after numbers. So I started putting those 2 together. Once I did that, when I looked in Catholicism, I saw that there's 7 technical archangels when you look at the book of Enoch as well. Only 3 have been listed, but the book of Enoch was one of the first texts to actually say 7. And then there's a multiple watchers. So then I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then when you read further into Emerald Tablets, they actually have a piece where they give a different name to the number lords. And when you look up those names, they're the Aramaic names for the chakras. And so when you look into that, you begin to see this pattern of like these vibrations and frequencies and names all around the number 7. But the way that I put it together is like 7 archangels, there's 7 lords, there's 7 rays. Those are all the same thing. There's 7 chakras. Again, those are all the same thing. And I'll do a different session on chakras because there's something interesting that I'm uncovering there, and maybe you guys can help me dig deeper into it, but for a different time. And then I also was looking at the Big Bang, the creation, the formation of Earth itself. In the book of Secret Creation, they talk about how the 7 heavens were created, how each planet manifested and happened. And then you have the Big Bang Theory, which is in Kabbalah. When you look at the Tree of Life, it actually says one of them is the Big Bang, one of the main energy centers, and then you have the zodiac, and then you have the major arcana wrapped into all of this as well. So there's one, and then 7 days, 7 nights to create the heavens and the earths in Catholicism. So that's another connection that I started making among multiple different religions, backgrounds, cultures, things like this through these esoteric texts. And the last one is just the 7 principles, laws of nature. In the Emerald Tablets, they call them keys. We are familiar with the name universal laws. You can also find them as principles. These are kind of littered throughout many different esoteric texts, and they all come together to create this big picture. So I've always believed that every culture, every religion, every spiritual background, you can call it, I always thought none of those are right or wrong. They each hold a small piece of a really big puzzle. And when you allow yourself to collect all the pieces, that's the only way to complete the puzzle. But I also understand that completing the puzzle should not be the end goal. Once you complete the puzzle, you should have more questions, not answers. If you get all the answers, there's no purpose. There's no drive, motivation to live, to strive, to do. So I think that what it does is allow you to get to another level of questioning and consciousness and understanding. And that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve by comparing a lot of these esoteric texts and literatures and knowledges and put them together to get a bigger picture. If you guys have ideas, thoughts, anything like that, feel free to share, comment. I'd love to hear what you think about this, and I'll give you guys update as I go through it and find more. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.